10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 401. Hey, everybody, welcome back to episode 401 of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. This is going to be our last episode on Have You Met Miss Jones, which I'm sure a lot of you are happy about. But I think we covered a lot of ground, and I really, really hope that coming out of this, you really know this tune. And what we're going to do today is, as usual, when we finish covering something, we're going to do our tune of the month, which is obviously going to be Have You Met Miss Jones. And I've written a pretty long etude, the longest etude that I've ever written, which is 3 choruses, trying to sort of sum up all this information and give you something that you can sort of study or play through with some concepts in mind to sort of leave this tune. Okay, so basically what we want to cover today, it shouldn't be too long of an episode, is how I've structured the etude and what to look for as you play through it. So first of all, if you have the PDF of this tune, what you are going to notice is that I haven't put any chord changes in it. Gasp! A jazz etude without any of the chord symbols in there. What? But that's very purposeful, right? Because we have been just talking about this tune for 8 weeks now, inside and out and inside and out. And one of the things that we've been doing is we've been trying to focus on things like key center and the bigger structure of the tune. So really, at the end of the day, there's really no point for me to put these chord changes in there. You should really know this tune like the back of your hand at this point. So let's play an etude without any chord changes staring us in the face. And what that's going to do is it's going to stop us from conceiving of the etude and seeing it through the lens of chord to chord to chord to chord, because the whole point has been not to think about this tune chord to chord to chord, even though there's a lot of chords happening in this particular composition. So that's the first thing. Let's dive into the actual etude. So it's 3 choruses, and I want to tell you a little bit about the structure of these 3 choruses. So for the first chorus, I only used diatonic notes from the various keys that we go through. So if you go all the way back to the beginning of looking at this tune, what we did was we figured out that there was just a handful of key centers found in this tune, right? So we have concert F being the big, big, big one. Then we go to concert B flat, then concert G flat, then concert D. And that's it. Those are the 3 key centers. So all I've done was I've tried to come up with something that's interesting, that at the end of the day doesn't sound like we're really missing anything. It shouldn't sound like I was handcuffed to this thing, even though I put a limitation on myself. And it's all diatonic. So that's just kind of to prove, hey, diatonic soloing, if you really put a lot of effort into it and figure out how to make it interesting, can be just as interesting as opening the world to every single device that we've ever heard of, mentioned online or by one of our teachers or whatever. It can be just as interesting to just stay in the key. So the first chorus is all diatonic. And one of the interesting things will be to figure out if you can spot where the key center changes as you're playing through it. Okay. The second chorus, I opened myself up to non-diatonic notes, but I was not thinking chord to chord. Okay. So I was still thinking about those big, big, big key centers and trying to only address that. But now within my lines, I allowed myself, if I was hearing it or I thought that the statement needed it, to play some non-diatonic notes. But this goes back to something that we talked about in a previous episode. You can use non-diatonic notes and still get a key center effect by making sure that you're using those non-diatonic notes for a reason, right? We don't just want to use a whole bunch of chromatic notes without thinking about like why we're using them at the end of the day. Or do they serve the key center that I'm playing in? Do they serve this phrase that I am trying to come up with? So that's what I was thinking in the second chorus is it's cool to use notes outside of the key signature, but they sort of have to be there for a reason. And at the end of the day, I kind of want them to serve this key center sound. So it'd be really interesting for you to go through that second chorus and maybe think about some of the more interesting things that you think are going on, because everybody will think that a certain part of it is more interesting, less interesting. You'll like parts, you'll not like parts. But figure out when you do like something, and is there any non-diatonic notes, and why do you think they're there? Or I guess a better way of putting that is not why do you think they're there? How do they serve the phrase? What's interesting about those non-diatonic notes that makes it sound cool to you? So there's the second chorus. First chorus, entirely diatonic. Second chorus, a lot of non-diatonic stuff, but it's serving the key center thing. And then the third chorus is all about what we talked about in the last couple episodes, which is tension and release. So I allowed myself to do non-diatonic stuff, but I was still thinking in key centers. But then I was also thinking about some tension and release in some of those spots that we talked about in the last episode. And I think it's less important to figure out like what device I am using to create that tension, but think more about, can you hear that there is a big sense of tension and release in some of those key places? And maybe you can print out the etude and, do that stuff, right? Like tension, release. And then you could think about that a little bit deeper if you want to, but I don't want you to get caught up in like, oh, is he using diminished? Is he using altered? Is he using whole tone? Is he using whatever? That's not the point right now. Try to see if you can catch on orally to those big statements of tension and then release. So that's it. 3 choruses. That's what I was thinking for each chorus. Now I'd like to play the etude for you. right, so there you have it, and the Patreon members will obviously get access to that etude so that you can then go and practice it yourself. You could use this in so many different ways. You could say, you know what, I'm not going to analyze any of this. I'm just going to go through and I'm going to play it a bunch of times. You could say, I'm going to go through, I'm going to play this, I'm going to maybe mark some spots that I think are interesting and maybe unpack those a little bit. Or you could be hardcore and you could go through and you could, figure out every little thing that's going on. Neither one of those things are better than the other. It's just a different approach. So go ahead and use it however you want to use it. This is obviously yours forever. So you could go back to it 100 times and look at it from a different angle because necessarily you'll be at a different point in your playing whenever you go back and you look at this. So use this however you want to. I just wanted to explain what I was thinking, and I wanted you to actually read a melodic statement without any chord changes on it. I think that'll really force you into a different frame of mind. Now, if you want to get this etude and you want to support the podcast at the same time, you can join our Patreon. And this is just a way that we keep the podcast going. And I try to give you some materials, whether they be trading tracks or backing tracks or PDFs when appropriate, every single week with every single episode. We've got all the episodes over there. So at this point, that's over 400. And it's very affordable and a great way to make sure that this podcast keeps going and keeps coming out. That really, really helps me. So if you want to find that and you want to become a member, just go over to our website, 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners, or you can go to patreon.com and search up the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson podcast. As soon as you decide to make that donation, you get instant access to everything. And there's a lot of stuff over there to keep you busy. I wanted to give a quick shout out to a bunch of new patrons this week. Thank you to David, Craig, Daniel, Emily, and Elizabeth. Thank you all so much for supporting the show. I hope you're enjoying those materials and I hope you get something out of it. Something we're going to start doing soon too is some Zoom hangs with the Patreon members because I want to hang out with you and learn a little bit more about where you're coming from, the difficulties you're having, the successes you're having, and be able to address some people's questions. So I want to start working a little bit closer with you, and we're going to start scheduling some hangs for the Patreon members. Okay, so get to it, start playing this etude, and let me know if you have any questions. And we are going to take a week off because there's 5 Fridays in March. So we'll see you that first week of April. All right. Hope you're all staying safe and healthy out there, doing well, and we will talk to you soon. Have a good weekend, everybody. Bye.